More activity expected in the Eastern Pacific in the next 5 days. Now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for June 10th. Right now, there are no new tropical cyclones, only the long-lost remnants of Alex, which was a tropical storm in the Atlantic some days ago and now passing by the British Isles and Iceland. At this point, on its way to its eventual death over Scandinavia. 28 storms have formed so far this year in the Atlantic. Alex is well off the screen on day 10 of hurricane season, with no other areas of interest to mark on our chart right now, so all quiet in the Atlantic at this early point of the season. Eastern Pacific, though, tells a different story. On day 27 of hurricane season, we've got a moderate chance for an area off the coast of central Mexico, and another area of interest that could try to become something within the next 5 days off the coast of Nicaragua, but could end up becoming something later on as it extends itself towards the west-northwest beyond that period. In the Western Pacific, nothing active once again and nothing likely to form anytime soon. It's a pretty dead basin right now, and it's starting to fall behind its average number for the time of year. The average at this point is 3. In the Indian Ocean, there's nothing active right now, very quiet indeed, as you would sort of expect at this point. I mean, storms aren't too likely in this area, but they can happen around this time of year. So the big story really is looking at the Eastern Pacific, where you can see lots of convection blowing up, mainly along the coast of the whole continent really, coastal regions there, but out at sea you can see some very disorganized messes of convection, but we expect that we'll start to see something get better defined there within the next 24 to 36 hours, and you'll expect to see it towards the left hand side, well, center left of the screen there, and that blow up that's occurring off Nicaragua could be loosely associated with the next system that comes up there, that 10%. Looking elsewhere in the Atlantic, you can see interesting picture, frontal system off the east coast of the United States, a little low pressure system along the Lesser Antilles, the Leeward Islands, not a tropical threat, and convective blow-ups around Cuba and over Florida. And here's another look at the Eastern Pacific. You can see the broader picture there. Large areas of moisture, generally over Mexico and certainly over the rest of Central America, the other countries there. Nicaragua up towards Honduras and El Salvador, getting a lot of rain right now. And in the Western Pacific, you will see that things are still very quiet here. A few little flare-ups in the tropical zone, but in general the Western Pacific is very quiet and typical for the time of year in a quiet phase, which is of course spurred on by the current climatological pattern. Looking out towards the Indian Ocean, there's some blow-ups of convection going on, but really not too much to talk about. Fairly quiet picture illustrated there. Convection blowing up generally around northern Indonesia and little bits here and there in West Bengal. And in the Australian region, a frontal system pushing through New Caledonia and Vanuatu, but generally it's a fairly quiet picture. Australia looking pretty settled, apart from the westernmost part of Western Australia there, getting some precipitation. Global sea surface temperatures right now look like this. Still decent temperatures in the Eastern Pacific, although not as warm as it would be in warmer years, but still 28 pushing 30 degrees Celsius. The Atlantic is warming up nicely. The Western Atlantic, Western Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, 28 degrees plus, 26 degree isotherm, pretty much reaching the Outer Banks now and extending much beyond out at sea, and over parts of the Lesser Antilles getting up towards 28 degrees now as well, and extending out eastwards as we start to see the MDR open up later on. North Indian Ocean, fairly warm temperatures once again, 30 degrees, quite common. It's just getting the storm to form in that area. And in the Western Pacific, it is just all waiting for that next tropical cyclone, with temperatures of 30 degrees or higher in a large part of the Philippine Sea, and only expanding and in significant chunks of the South China Sea, with 28-degree temperatures extending now into the East China Sea north of Taiwan at this point. So temperatures really starting to warm up at the higher latitudes too. Although, having said that, just off the eastern coast of China is below average in terms of sea surface temperature anomalies, and the eastern Pacific overall below average as well, especially where Agatha was last week, a big cool pool there. So systems that form in the eastern Pacific will have an uphill struggle. The Atlantic is warmer than average overall, although a little cool spot around Cuba, and this is the oceanic heat content, and once again you can see the Gulf of Mexico there with that big area there, the loop current, providing a decent amount of oceanic heat content. Look at the eastern Pacific though, there was a little red zone there a couple of weeks ago, and now it's just all petered out towards blue areas, so the eastern Pacific is really dead in terms of oceanic heat content, in contrast with the western Pacific, which hardly ever fails. This is a look at the remnants of Alex, and you can see that tropical storm force winds, or would be if it was actually tropical, they're just gale force winds now, extending through northwestern parts of Scotland and along the southeastern coast of Iceland there. Very broad system, as is extratropical cyclones, so an interesting one to look at there just briefly, and then it weakens off, but could deliver significant precipitation to Norway, where it might make landfall there, maybe 3 or 4 inches, and nearing 2 inches in Scotland. Looking at the Central American area then, and you'll see what happens in the Eastern Pacific. So there's the formation of one storm. That's what the National Hurricane Center have at 60% right now. GFS wants a hurricane out of it within the 5-day period, and then making landfall in central Mexico. You'll also notice another system try to become something just off the coast of Nicaragua and El Salvador. I don't think it quite makes it, and I think 10% is applicable for that one. Now take a look at the precipitation. Regardless of whether these systems form or not, it's going to be a very wet period along the Central American continent, and you can see there some areas in the next 7 days, this is getting very high amounts of precipitation in the pink zones there, Nicaragua into El Salvador and Guatemala. Inches of rain there, getting up 22-24 inches of rain in one area there. That's an enormous amount. That's over 1,000 millimeters, and along the coast of Mexico there, ahead of that potential tropical cyclone, up to 15 inches, which is around, I think, 750 millimeters. Now let's take a look at the longer range, and you'll see first of all a potential tropical cyclone in the Atlantic. GFS has been saying this for a while. Whether it happens or not is a big question mark. Whether we'll actually get a significant hurricane forming entering the Gulf of Mexico. It is the kind of track you would expect for early season. The intensity, odds against, but it has happened before. And that's all the serious stuff done with at this point. You can take a look at the Force 13 store. You can scan that code there, and it will take you straight there. We now offer animations on our product list as well as our merch products. So the Scilly range, you can see at least a category 2 hurricane there making landfall in Louisiana, and the next system forming in the Eastern Pacific, also becoming a hurricane. This is on the long range GFS, so take it with a big pinch of salt. You may remember what happened, I think maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago now, when the GFS was running run after run with a massive hurricane approaching the Gulf Coast, and it never got anywhere at all, not even a 10% from the National Hurricane Center. So be aware of that. On this day, June 10th, 1997, we had something else entirely. It was a Category 5 in the Western Pacific. Typhoon Nestor, one of many Category 5s that year. Number somewhat disputed, some say 9, some say as high as 11. And in the Eastern Pacific, Tropical Storm Blanca, and in the South Pacific, Tropical Storm Kelly, currently active on June the 10th, 1997. Big El Nino year, and as you can see, the Pacific was lit up even at this point, and it was all year long, as we know. Back in 2022, can you believe it's been 25 years since 1997, The next name on the Atlantic hurricane list is Bonnie in the Eastern Pacific. It's Blas, and in the Central Pacific, we are still waiting for Hone. Well, thank goodness it's not been 25 years for that one yet. In the Western Pacific, the next name is Chaba. The North Indian Ocean, Sitrang on the way next. And we are in code blue, by the way, for the remnants of Alex, and that will probably last for about 10 minutes and then it will go away again. Elsewhere in the world, in the Australian region, the next name is Darian. The Southwest Indian Ocean sees Let Lama, and in the South Pacific, the next name is Harley. That's all for tonight. We'll have another tropical weather bulletin tomorrow night.